Please. Right, so you've heard what we think. What do you think? Questions? Anybody? We don't need microphones unless they're here. And we also have Slido. We have an app here where you can indeed send your questions. And there are already 3 questions. Some of them are anonymous. I'll put these to the panel in a moment. But what do you think? Come on. Go ahead. Are we okay with mics? Yeah, okay, perfect. Go ahead. Oh, there are the questions. Brilliant. Okay.
Morning. So Andy Evans from Sovereign. Can you talk a little bit further about engagement and what you define as engagement? You showed some metrics up on the board there, but there's difference between somebody is there and isn't there, and how do you plan to deal with that as an issue around engagement?
To me? Yep, I'm happy to take that one. Again, you have to understand I don't come from that pure commercial background here, but I'm very interested in engagement. We measure a whole bunch of things. We measure dwell time as an obvious issue of engagement. We look at how far people scroll down pages. We look at how frequently they come back to us. We've just ended the month yesterday, of course, and you have that anxious moment where if you're still measuring traffic in terms of audience size, which we very much do, you're looking at your unique browsers. And on day 1 of the month, obviously everybody turns up is pretty much a unique browser. They haven't been there before yet that month. By the end of the month, by the 31st day of the month, when you just want those numbers to go a little bit higher and a little bit higher, you get this anxious feeling that it's not going as well as it did on the first day, and that's because you've got the same number of people turning up, but they've been here so many times before that you're not adding to that unique pot. And I have to remind myself that's really good news, actually, because it means that the people we've got are coming back. We see engagement in social media in how much people comment on our stories. We measure the comments within our own on-site platform, how many people are debating those issues. Yes, a lot of the stuff that happens in the bottom half of the internet isn't great, but there's a lot of solid debate on there, actually. In fact, we end up, within Voices particularly, some people who leave comments on articles and then requested to come back and actually write articles because their response is that good. So from an editorial point of view, it's really diverse, but anything that shows that they're choosing us and that they're really doing more than just flicking on the first few sentences and scarbering again constitutes engagement to me.
I display the formula that we use, that is being used with many publishers as well, and it was time spent plus proof of readership multiplied by returning frequency, all divided by the cross-platform UVs. So that is a different equation. And beware of comments, because this full of polluted with trolls. A lot of advertisers, unless you can prove semantically that a lot of those comments are real engagement, especially with political stories and other stories, the trolls are all permanent, and there's a lot of bots involved there. And depth of scroll as well, especially on mobile. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that depth of scroll is very important. We include that in proof of readership because you do know that it's a real person, not a bot. So, but unless you equate, unless you're selling CPH, my call from clicks to clocks, unless you're decidedly selling that, the engagement conversation is like talking about the gender of angels, because you're still selling CPMs. I don't know if you're still selling based on traffic, on CPMs, and if you're still in that dynamic, I think it doesn't matter what you call engagement. You're still selling anonymous eyeballs and just pure naked traffic.
I'd say there were a few things have happened around the industry. So there's been definitely this sort of shift from being driven by the reach number to engagement. Everyone has different ways of defining it. But the way I see it happening is you have you need to split it down, as Christian just did, if you're working in an editorial operation. So if you're working within social media, then you're looking at different engagement scores. If you're working on the articles themselves, you may be looking at scroll depth or something like that. But from a business point of view, how do you optimize things? And that's where some of these sort of coordinated engagement metrics that roll up frequency and numbers into a single metric are useful, because they allow you to optimize against something similar. So I think this term is very confusing because it's used differently within the editorial side of the business and with from the business and commercial side.
Yeah. Right, so we had a question from the floor. Please prepare another one, but there's plenty coming through Slido here through the app. So shall we take some of these?
Yeah, sure.
Right. First question, what's the panel's view on The Guardian's approach to requesting donations? Nick?
I think, like everything, I'm a journalist by nature, and I'm predisposed to say something is not going to work. So when Chris and I were doing a panel just after you went online only, I was predisposed to say that's not going to work. And similarly, when this first happened, I said that's not going to work. And I think we need to be humble to recognize our own biases. Journalists are, as Christian says, far too negative, and we don't think enough about this. By the way, it's statistically proven that journalists are more negative because they're always thinking about the downsides and in a good way. And I think there are many ways to making this work, and we don't know what the answer is going to be. It definitely will not be one path. It will not be paywalls for 1 or 2 publications. It's going to be this mixed range of things. And so good luck to them. I think they've been successful so far. My suspicion is it's going to reach a bump. So they're going to get to that loyal audience, and getting beyond that is then the really hard bit, and they just need to work at it every year to increase it by 1%, 2%, 3%. Correct. And if they do that over 20 years, they'll make it. But not just with donations, right? They're going to need advertising revenue, they're going to need e-commerce and all those other things, and they kind of play hand in hand, as Christian was saying.
Christian, begging ball for the Independent at some point?
Yeah, I was going to mention that. I mean, for first thing to say is that it's working. That's great. It's great for everyone. We're a really competitive industry. When someone works something out, it's good news for us all. We don't have to kind of turn our noses up at it. The begging bowl thing I was going to mention though, because I think it does feed into that. That sense of positivity, or on the other hand, desperation around the industry, and I think it's a nice message. It's a come on guys, we're sending people's expense. It costs a lot of money to get Patrick to Iraq this week, and we can. I think every publisher feels that the more we can get in the door, the more journalism we can do, and that benefits the users. So if it's working for the Guardian, great. Let's have a look at it. It's one of the many options, as Nick says.
Yeah, but I think one of the funny things in our focus groups that just amazed me was the extent to which people thought that publishers were still rolling in money, because we just put all these ads out in front. So you must be doing well. You've got 25 ads on your site, or you're giving away all these newspapers, right? So actually, that's not a great climate for asking for donations, because most people think the news industry is doing well. Yeah. So that's about selling and marketing where we are.
It's interesting because our daily edition app, $12.99 a month, to say I'm not trying to be a salesman here, but just it feels like it's incredibly cheap for considering what people are getting. It's incredibly good value as an offering, because I see the bills. But it's kind of has to go hand in hand. I mean, it's a very clean reading experience. There aren't noisy ads in that, because you feel that you paid for it. So I think that's an interesting dynamic.
Yeah, I mean, and my point of view is it's not sustainable. I do have some inside information at The Guardian. I know it's the beginning of a process. They're moving to reader revenue. They're following very much what I'm saying, but it's not sustainable. But
we haven't mentioned events either, by the way, which is another thing that's interesting for publishers.
Yes, but
all
again,
these revenue streams are interesting.
Again, you're still vulnerable, and that's my point.
It's being negative again, you see. It's being negative.
You're still one-legged stool.
Pre-programmed.
You're still one-legged stool. Right, questions on the floor. Anybody else? Because we have 3 more there on this. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, it was really great to see how you were somewhat aligned. I mean, there was this, there wasn't as much difference of opinion as we were led to believe in the beginning. But there was one suggestion. Certainly, Nick was saying, "Look, people will pay for this," and Juan, you were saying that still it's 3%, maybe 5% maximum. You got 95% of the people who are not paying; they're not putting their money up, and I'm just wondering what you would do for the remaining 95% of the users.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, again, don't think of this. Unfortunately, in our industry, we've gone through binary choices and all these false dichotomies. The latest one we had to overcome is the Talibans of digital and print, and you must abandon print, and you must go to digital, and so on. And now, please do not misconstrue what I'm saying as hard paywall or one method. Yeah, it's a journey. It's a journey. You begin with metered, possibly. I don't know. I mean, with some of our clients, we choose metered. With some, we choose premium. But most likely, metered is a good way to begin that journey of the funnel. And then after a year or two, after you hit that conversion rate that you want, you can begin to migrate to freemium. People's tolerance for different subscription models are very, very high. Micropayments, or a combination thereof. Or in Sweden, they're using three subscription journeys. And by subscription, I mean data and payment. Yeah. So yes, you look at those numbers saying, okay, but all right, I'm just focusing now on 3%. And what about this huge audience I've built? Am I abandoning it? No. there's a different experience for them to keep them as engaged consumers. So don't think of this as, oh, I must choose one model. Yeah? And I think even more important, which we didn't really get to, and that is the question today of your age as journalists, as publishers, is, do I have content worth paying for? And that's a question we're not asking. We're all talking about the methodology, but we're not really examining, am I really doing journalism worth paying for? And I'm afraid the answer is not, well, we'll become rich, and that will give you some revenue.
But I disagree. I think everybody's asking that question. I don't think nobody's asking that question at all. I challenge you to find a single journalist in this city who hasn't asked themselves that question. I think that, again, that falls into the category, I'm afraid, for me, of things that where we're looking at a problem and we're not looking at the success we've got. Yes, we do journalism that's worth paying for, absolutely.
Good. Anybody else? Any other questions? If not, we'll go to the Slido. Please, right here.
Yeah, I just want to pick up the subject of trust, which you've all mentioned in slightly different contexts. It occurs, if you like, one of the holy grails in what we're looking at into the future is a different kind of relationship between advertisers and publishers that is recognised by the audience, and that seems to be broadly based on trust. But how do you actually value that when you set the prices for the revenues in terms, in a market that has become commoditised to a certain degree when you're looking at digital products? And how it seems a very amorphous thing. So I'd be interested to hear your views.
How do you make it tangible?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think it is converting into metrics that you can talk to advertisers or to others around why they should do a sponsorship deal with you. And a lot of that comes from trust is also about moving from anonymous to known, and therefore you know who these people are, and you can you've got a relationship with them, and you've got a relationship with these people, and that matches what advertisers want as well. So I think it's partly around that. The other thing I would say about trust is, I think that it is about changing the proposition. So I agree. I think there's a lot of innovation and change happening now about recognizing that it's not just the business model that's broken, but actually the model of sort of telling people about things and not, talking to people and listening to them and those aspects. That's, I think, a fundamental change. I think a lot of the future of trust is going to be in community and in the way we build networks, rather than the old sort of we're going to tell you what it's like. And I think The Independent does that really well. And it's a lot of your success is built on trying to build trust in networks, right?
Yeah, and I'd say another thing, we had a quick conversation before we came up actually about video. Because I don't think that trust is, to my mind at least, trust isn't something that is quantifiable. You're right. You can't say, well, trust of 16.3 or something. It doesn't really work, is it, like that? You either trust something or you don't. It's a kind of you either buy in or you don't. And it's about relevance. It's about, it is about trust. It's about quality. And these are very difficult issues. But it has to underpin everything you do. And it underpins everything you do if you're a free model, if you're a subscription model, whatever you do. So I think all of us have to bear in mind trust. And video is not just a great revenue opportunity, but I think in the digital space, it's a great way of building trust. I was saying to Nick, there's an issue that I feel sometimes. It's almost like The Independent. When you're a paper, you're a tangible object. You're a real thing. It kind of lands on your doormat and it makes a noise when you turn the pages. When you're a website and your links in a social network or on a homepage or wherever, it's slightly less tangible, less real. If you can show a piece of video of your journalist on a front line somewhere, speaking to somebody who's been a victim of a bombing raid or something, it makes everything incredibly real. And it tows you away from that anxiety about fake news and really back into what journalism is all about. And I think if trust is a good excuse to go on making the case for that kind of journalism, great. Shoe leather journalism is a fantastic thing that you mentioned earlier, and there are other forms of journalism that are also fantastic things. But that real world, video recorded journalism has a lot to do for building trust.
Great. Have we answered, more or less?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Right, but let's continue the conversation. So, questions there. Should publishers, rather than Facebook or VC, be investing in the Netflix of news? Yes, please. From my point of view, please, yes. If you can all find some common purpose, London is a great place for digital innovation. It would be great if
Is
you
it
all get
practical?
together. and
Could
do it.
publishers really, given their competitive nature, get together and do it? It's a little bit like, well, in the States, I suppose you've had Hulu, isn't it, where you have competitive television stations getting together to provide a sort of single... But consumers want it, right? The underlying desire is to sort of have an aggregated place to play one subscription, to pick and choose between quality titles. The problem is that the people who have the most to lose from that are the ones who already have very successful businesses, and that's the content that you really need to be in the Netflix for news. That's why I think it won't happen in the short term, but it is fundamentally what consumers want.
And
They want to pay a reasonable price for a range of publications.
It is commendable that the effort is made. Would you join in if that was presented to you?
It wouldn't be up to me, but I'd like to think we would. I think that if there's an opportunity to tell stories, I want to be on the platform.
But you've got
as a
nothing to lose,
journalist,
right?
so-
Because you're not trying. You don't have a subscription business, but so
We
the
do.
independent.
We do.
Well, okay, you have a small.
Yeah, for the app. Yeah.
For the app, but it's not like the FT that is charging very high premium rates, and if it was part of this, it would
But then
cannibalize the business.
is the FT the model for a Netflix of news? Netflix of news makes me think of. I mean, Netflix is not a niche product; it's a very broad category, and it's populist. So I don't really see that. So, but one thing I think is interesting with the Netflix of news. Sorry, I'm looking at you like you asked that question, but I don't know who asked that question. But one of the interesting things about the Netflix of news idea is that I think at the moment at least, the idea of going to one aggregator app where some things will be chosen for you algorithmically because you clicked on a lot of stories from that publisher is kind of false. I think a lot of consumers really like the news space at the moment. They like searching for stories, they like going on Twitter to find stories, they like clicking on the stories in their Facebook feeds, they like going to home pages. It's a nice grazing experience. And actually, one of the things with the Netflix of news concept is it's not just a revenue model, it's an entirely different user journey.
Right. We have 5 minutes left. I really want to get more questions in, so let's quickly answer the second one because I think it's related to this initial question, the Netflix of news. And my response to this is yes. And we're already seeing the habits. You do research, most people check. We professionals don't. We check many sources, but most people out there, they download 1 or 2 apps. And it's back to the habits of the publishing printing age. You have first read and second read, and I'm afraid that will be the case. Some of you, if you're not able to invest in quality journalism or be relevant enough to that audience, if you're not 1 or 2, you will fall by the wayside in a universe, in a world of people valuing news and paying for
But
it.
you're talking about subscription, right? You're not.
Yeah,
I mean,
I'm talking about
people are
this-
not going to use 1 or 2. They're not going to go back to using 1 or 2 sources.
to pay, correct.
To pay.
No,
so
absolutely.
people fundamentally want
Yeah.
to pick and choose, particularly young people. I mean, they are not going to go back, and we need to whatever solutions we have need to work with
But
that.
psychologically, still 1 or 2. Still
For payment, I agree with
yeah,
you. But
the
because
habit
of the
has
cost.
transferred from the industrial age of print to digital. Most people on
Absolutely.
a regular basis. Of course, they come across many different sources, but in terms of young people, you have a lot of people say, "Oh, New York Times plus Vice," and so on. So it's 2.
Yeah, I think it all sounds like. Sorry to be relentlessly happy this morning, but I think it sounds great. I mean, if we're doing a good job of being profitable and growing at the moment with what we've got, and there's an extra opportunity to get more people in to subscribe for products alongside that. I mean, you asked the question earlier, what do we do about the other 95%? Well, the other 95% are still contributing to the business model. They're not. We shouldn't be. I don't think we want to kind of alienate and chase those people away with a stick and make them feel bad about coming along to read our news and enjoy it. I completely agree with Nick that I think that we're never going to recreate the reading habits of the past. They are going to be different. There may be some willing to buy in and contribute directly. I think there absolutely is. I mean, The Guardian have shown it, and we all show it. That there is a market for paid-for journalism, but the market for the non-paid section isn't so bad either.
Yeah. Anybody else? Please, Dilip. Do you have a question as well? Oh, sorry, scratching your head. Yeah, right, confused. Go ahead.
I don't know if I'm saying this correctly, but I'm drawing the inference from what you said, Nick, that trust drives all commercial models, not just paid, but advertising, all of the things that you're trying to look at. And in the UK, as you've pointed out, trust in journalism is lower than in other markets. Obviously, there are brands in there that are more trusted than others. Obviously, I'm going to talk about collective agendas because the AOP, but I'm wondering if there are things that need to be done at a collective level, and if they should be done, should they be focused on trust, and would that then drive better revenue streams all around for publishers?
Yeah.
Good.
I agree. No, I think you're absolutely right. I think that getting our collective voice across, celebrating what we do, is super important. As I keep saying, I think that we do a great job of criticising mistakes that other publishers make. You know, mistakes have always happened within journalism. There's never been an era where mistakes have never happened, and we kind of very aggressively pounce upon them in a very adversarial way. I think that we can all be guilty of that. But I think that I think you see perhaps now more collaborations between news brands and joint investigations across maybe a TV publisher and a digital publisher, that kind of thing happening. I think that's very positive. I think that we see lots of advertising around. I'm kind of more aware of going through my world and seeing adverts that tell me that how successful print is as a means of kind of trusted news. I don't really feel, as a consumer of those adverts, that I see as many within the digital space, for instance.
Yeah, I would say that there is lots of scope for this. So speaking much more clearly about what the problems are of the news industry collectively would be one. I think the other thing is in terms of differentiating what a trusted brand looks like in social networks compared with other things. So sort of whatever verification, better branding, all of these things requires publishers to speak with one voice. And that is part of the, whether your model is that you're more reliant on social media or less reliant, it's critical that those brands that are much more recognizable than they are within the social networks. And that's going to be far more powerful if brands work together.
Yeah. And just to return to what I mentioned at the beginning, Catalonia, I returned to George Orwell, and I was reading Homage to Catalonia, and I kept going, and I bought 1984. And he has a brilliant description of what journalism is, which I think we all need to return to. And he says, journalism is to publish something that somebody doesn't want published. The rest is public relations. And I think that's so relevant to our age, because everybody in America knows that it is the New York Times that broke the Weinstein story. They're the ones that had the guts to go for it. They stood up against a giant, and they did it through really thorough journalism, while the New Yorker was being held back because it was scared witless that this could really blow in their faces and they could end up as Gawker. So I think that's, as an industry, as an AOP, that's a message for you to, every year, no matter what the brand is, to celebrate that and to send that message across. And I think The Guardian is doing successfully, buy the newspaper that nobody can buy. This kind of messaging is very powerful, and I encourage you as well to look at the campaigns that we gave a Grand Prix this year in Cannes Lions for the New York Times. It's unbelievable. And again, I'm talking about the New York Times, but even smaller brands can still restate that message and communicate that message that journalism is more relevant today than ever before. You're not going to rebuild the trust any other way than through good journalism and through focusing on those stories and breaking them. And the rest is just, we're in the same old dynamic of, trying to close a door that has been open for 20 years of free content. It will only be done if they see the intrinsic value. Back to my message, everything that generates value should generate revenue. If not, get out of this business, get out of publishing. If not, you're just going to be doing, with all due respect, which journalism, consumer journalism. No, I want The Independent to be sustained because its journalism is breaking Weinstein-type stories. And when you get to that dynamic, when you get a subscriber subscribing for that reason, you've made it, from my point of view.
So we should go and close it down immediately. That's your advice, is it? Great. Okay.
No, it's just...
Thanks for that.
Sorry.
I'll take that away.
Sorry,
Thank you.
I mean that in a constructive way, that I think the reason for subscribing has to be the journalism.
Of course.
Everything else is good, it's good revenue, events, fantastic. But unless you get people subscribing because this guy's broke Weinstein, this guy's, the Washington Post is doing all these exclusives about Trump.
Patrick in Baghdad is not reviewing iPhone cases, by the way, just to be clear about this.
I
Just in case you've misunderstood.
no.
I think you may have misunderstood the point I was trying to make.
I think that's important, but I don't think that is there are different kind of need states for journalism. Explaining the world,
Exactly.
giving people something to talk about with their friends. These are also really critical aspects of it. Now, in terms of building that sort of pillar level trust, for the big brands, but not every brand is going to compete in that world.
I think that's right.
I think there are many ways to profitability. There are many ways to good journalism.
I mean, journalism, as always, when you look back at the greatest papers at the greatest points in their history, there have been various types of journalism. There's sports reporting, there's investigative journalism, there's foreign journalism, there's funny stuff, there's stuff that makes us laugh, there's arts journalism, there's lifestyle journalism, there are restaurant reviews. It's different.
But the
And we
positioning of
need
the
to-
Independent hasn't been any of that in the past. That's what I'm saying.
We've always, sorry,
No.
just to correct that. The Independent on Sunday Review magazine, when it launched back in the day, which I had the privilege of working on, was award-winning, groundbreaking. It brought lifestyle journalism to Fleet Street in an emphatic new way. It's always been part of the
No, but what
offering.
but
I agree with
but
you
what I'm
that
saying
what
is that
people want
it's-
to pay for most and what people get excited and drawn to, particularly in a world which is so difficult to understand right now, which is another reason why we need quality journalism in that way, is the foreign reporting, is the courageous journalism, is exposing corruption and holding people to account. But it doesn't mean we need to turn our backs on other forms of journalism that A, readers like, B, bring in revenue, and C, play to our brand values.
Absolutely.